Does yoga help against panic disorder? There is a brand new study published in the journal Careers in which they found huge effects. To be honest, I've rarely seen such huge effect sizes for a treatment against panic disorder. And surprisingly, those effects were achieved with a yoga intervention. But is this study any good, or should we remain skeptical? For their study, the scientists randomly assigned participants to two groups. Of course, all participants were people suffering from panic disorders. So in the past, they had experienced oftentimes unexpected and out of the blue panic attacks. So moments of extreme and strong fear with all the body symptoms of sweating, heart racing, and, for example, difficulties to breathe. And of course, afterwards, many developed a fear of the fear. So they got an anxiety that these panic attacks could occur again. And therefore, they started to avoid a lot of situations, like for some, maybe exercising, for others, maybe going to public places where they expected that such panic attacks could occur. And by the way, such panic disorders are not that rare. The lifetime risk of developing a panic disorder is at about 7%. So those participants were randomly assigned to two groups. One group, which was the control condition, received what the scientists called the standard care, so a standard treatment. And at this point, unfortunately, the scientists are very vague. They only say, well, this could mean that they got, for example, medications against their anxiety, or they got, for example, CBT. But obviously, it also could mean that they got some kind of other treatment, which probably is much less effective than CBT, for example. The second group got exactly the same treatment. They also got this standard care, which might have included, for example, medications, but they also took part in a very rigorous yoga training. And this training was really intense because it lasted 12 weeks in which they had to practice yoga 5 times a week for 60 minutes. And now you can ask yourself, would you have done that? Would you take part in a yoga intervention, going to yoga groups, not only 1 week or 2 weeks, but for 12 weeks, so almost 3 months, and 5 times a week for 1 hour? And I find it very surprising that the scientists write that there was no dropout, because usually with such intense interventions, we see serious dropout. At some point, some participants say, well, I cannot do that any longer, or some get ill, or anything happens, and therefore they cannot participate any longer. Nevertheless, for those who continued the treatment, it really seemed to pay out, because in comparison to the control condition, in which the anxiety scores dropped just 32%, in the yoga intervention group, the anxiety went down 72%. So a really huge effect. And of course, the big question is, why should yoga be that effective for treating panic disorders? And there might be some reasons. First of all, going to this yoga class could have been some kind of exposure therapy, because many of the participants probably had second thoughts about going to the training, because they probably also had some fears that they might get panic attacks when they go there. And probably these negative expectations, these fears, never turn out to be real, because instead they probably experienced, well, if I go there, I'm not getting a panic attack. Instead, I can relax, and maybe I'm even having fun, and I'm finding new friends. And by the way, finding new friends, getting social support, connecting to people might have been the second working mechanism. We know from many studies that social support can be very good for your mental health. So these might have been 2 reasons why the training was effective. A third reason might have been that the yoga intervention also promoted some kind of accepting mindset. And we know from many other studies, especially from studies about acceptance and commitment therapy, that this kind of accepting mindset many times is much better to cope with anxiety than, for example, suppressing or trying to control your anxiety. So in this yoga intervention, there were exercises like, for example, just observing your breathing and observing how it comes and goes, but without trying to change it, but without trying to control it. And you were just observing it, you were just in a meditative and a mindful and accepting state. And this state is great when it comes to anxiety, because it's much better to tell your anxiety, it's all okay. I know you just want to protect me. Sometimes your hugging is a bit strong, but it's okay. I do not fight you, and I embrace you, I welcome you. And if we do so, oftentimes the fear fades away. A final reason, of course there might be even more, but a final reason might have been that by going to the yoga class and by exercising, stretching, balancing, a little bit of strengthening, some participants probably began to feel better in their body. It probably just felt more robust, and therefore chances are that they began to trust their body more. And this is something that's problematic with panic disorder as well, because those panic attacks oftentimes come out of the blue. You feel a little bit irritated. You do no longer know what is going on in my body. And by doing those exercises and learning that your body can feel robust and that it can do more than you thought, many probably got back some trust and some self-confidence. But at this point, you might have thought to yourself, well, some of those working mechanisms might also occur when doing other sports, like for example, running or playing soccer and going to dancing classes or doing resistance training. When you do so, for sure your body will feel more robust as well afterwards. And going to a fitness center for 12 weeks of course also is some kind of exposure. And this definitely is the biggest weakness of this study, because in the control condition, in the control group, there was no counterpart to this very intense yoga intervention. And therefore the big question is, how strong would have been the effects if in the control condition there would have been a running intervention for 12 weeks, 5 times a week and 60 minutes, or if they had taken part in a resistance training. So at this point in time, we can only say, yes, those results are very promising. And if you are wondering if yoga could help you with your panic disorder, the answer seems to be yes. But at this point in time, we cannot say yoga is superior to other sports. Maybe because of the cultivation of an accepting mindset, but at this point in time, and in fact there are other studies, like for example about running for the treatment of panic attacks, that other sports are promising as well. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you want to know more about psychological treatments, of course feel free to take a look at the website, and maybe we will see you next time.